that, it's my pleasure to introduce Michael O'Brien. He is our presenter today. Michael is part of A&R Solar. He's been with A&R Solar for the past 5 years. He'll give a little more of a presentation about A&R and himself. During his time here, even though 5 years isn't very long, he has overseen the development of a couple thousand projects between Washington State and Oregon State. He's originally from Arizona, where he was born and raised before making his way over to sunny Southern California. And a fun fact, Michael has dual citizenship with Ireland, which maybe he'll get to talk about as well. He's the father of one, so he's got plenty of good perspective on what kids are interested in when it comes to solar. And I'm excited to see what his stimulating presentation has in store for us and see what questions that brings up for you as well. So with that, Michael, I will hand things over to you and let you get started.
Well, thank you so much, Casey. Appreciate it. I hope I'm coming through loud and clear. Tell me if I'm not.
You sound great.
Okay, great. Well, welcome everyone. This is Solar or Photovoltaics 101, brought to you by A&R Solar. I'm broadcasting live from my basement here in West Seattle. Many of us are at home, staying safe, and I appreciate that. I think maybe my son of 11 might be upstairs watching this as well, so a hi to him and potentially my wife. It is Tuesday, April 14th. You're in the right place. A&R Solar's presentation on Solar 101. On screen, you should see a picture of a lovely solar installation we did a couple of years ago at the Center for Wooden Boats, a wonderful nonprofit that teaches boatcraft and water safety, just at the south end of Lake Union in downtown Seattle, and kind of at the north end of all things that are Amazon headquarters. I'm delighted to present to you some facts about solar. I am excited to also have put into the webinar a couple of handouts you should be able to download from the console there. One is about questions you should be asking your solar installer if you should go down that path. Secondly, a kind of, hey, I'm interested in getting into solar or a solar job. What's the right path for me? And I'll bring that up on screen later. And then also, if you're an architect or general contractor, or you're going to be building a new house, there is a new construction guide there to start getting you thinking about the right things as it relates to solar. So with that, I will also say I'm delighted to see so many young people that have signed up. I promise you I'll try to keep your attention here. We'll keep it moving quickly. And I will give you a quick introduction to A&R and get to the content right now. All right, so who's A&R Solar? So we are A&R Solar, and we were born in 2007. So we've been at this now going into our 13th year. We have 82 employees, both in our Portland, Oregon, and our Seattle, Washington offices, serving both states border to border. As you can see in the upper right, the blue dots are clusters of solar installations that we've done for residential homes, in green for commercial entities or utilities, and yellow battery installations, which we're seeing more and more. We're also very deeply involved in our industry trade associations, which are Solar Installers of Washington and Oregon Solar Energy Industries Association, respectively. These are very important for supporting solar in our markets, and we always recommend pointing people like you to those industry trade associations to get kind of the real goods, the real skinny on solar. Two things they do really well are policy development. We help craft the laws in Washington and Oregon that propel solar forward and enshrine kind of some of the rights you have as, I'll call, a solar citizen. Also, we all sign up, all of the installers and manufacturers and people involved with solar sign up for a code of ethics. And that means we're responsible for making sure we treat people with respect, with dignity, with transparency, and with truth as a foremost set of tenets for working here. So I wanted to highlight that. A&R's been party to over 2,500 installations in the Northwest, 156 batteries, which is starting to skyrocket in use and popularity. And we've installed over 27 megawatts of power. We will define here shortly, so you can be a little more conversant in that. We're also a certified B Corporation, which means that helping those less fortunate and helping the environment are baked into our business model. And we're also part of a nationwide group called Amicus. It's like a solar cooperative. Think of it as the Ace Hardware of collectivizing solar installers. So if you have people or family that are interested in solar in other states, I'd recommend going there and finding great folks. And then our founders, these two goofballs you see here in the lower right, are Andy and Reeves, for which the company is named. They are both fathers as well, Andy of 3 and Reeves of twin boys 2. So those are our fearless leaders. So that's a bit about us. So, all right, let's get started. And I'm going to tell you just a quick story about Jennifer here in West Seattle, and kind of learn some of the things about solar along the way and the history of solar and how it works. Now, Jennifer here, her home pictured in West Seattle, not too far from me, went solar with her family of 4 last year. And I thought I'd just kind of catch you up on how the solar industry grew up and teach you some of the basics about how solar came along over the past 181 years, if you could believe that, to bring solar to Jennifer's roof. Also, do pay close attention because there will be some pop quizzes interspersed with the slides, and I'm really curious to see how all of you do and retain some of this knowledge. All right, so in the beginning, if you will, and I should have a laser pointer here, but in 1839, at the tender age of 19, Edmond Becquerel was experimenting in his father's laboratory in Paris, France. And lo and behold, Becquerel created the world's first photovoltaic cell. In this experiment, he used silver chloride, which is a solid, attached to platinum electrodes, which are kind of wires, and placed it in an acidic aqueous solution separated by this thin membrane here. When illuminated with light, electrical current was generated, and suddenly we were off to the races. So because of this work, the photovoltaic effect that Einstein later proved in 1905 also became known as the Becquerel effect. And solar awards are still today given out under that name. Now, the first real working solar module was built in 1883 by Charles Edgar Fritts, pictured here on the right. He was an American inventor who constructed modules by coating wide plates of copper and then coating them with selenium and topping that with an extremely thin, semi-transparent layer of gold leaf. Now, Fritts reported that the module produced a current that's, quote, is continuous, constant, and of considerable force. The current was responsive not only to sunlight, but to dim daylight and even candlelight. And Fritts suggested that, quote, we may see the photoelectric plate, the solar panel as he called it, which by the way is depicted in the lower right here in his patent filings. We may see the photoelectric plate competing with coal-fired fossil fuel plants. Can you believe that? In 1883, he was already calling a shot with solar and fossil fuels. Very interesting. And this in the lower middle here is Vanguard 1, which is clearly a satellite that's pictured at Cape Canaveral, Florida in 1958. Vanguard 1 was the world's first solar-powered satellite, launched on St. Patrick's Day in 1958. The net here from all of these components is that solar has been around a long, long time, has taken many leaps forward, and is here to stay. So let's kind of take a little bit of a deeper look to get acquainted with what's going on. So on the left, we have a traditional solar module, a modern day solar module, kind of chopped into layers, so you can see what each layer does. You have the frame that kind of holds everything together. You have a transparent layer of glass. You have an encapsulant, which is kind of the glue that sticks all these layers together. And then you have the solar cells themselves that are latticed with wire. That layer is about 4 millimeters thick, not too crazy. And then another layer of an encapsulant and a backsheet. Usually that's white, but sometimes can be black on the bottom, all leading to a junction box mounted on the back. Now this product is designed to last easily 30, sometimes 40 years, and has no moving parts except for the electrons that are effectively pushed through the solar cell by the sun. On the right, over here, you have this cross section of the solar cell itself, which has two key layers. The N-type silicon layer, or negative side, which is why they call it N-type, and then the P-type silicon layer, or the positive side. I'm sure you've kind of seen a positive and negative side to batteries, similar here. Once put together in the manufacturing process, once they're sandwiched together, a thin layer is formed between them called the PN junction, this little thin line here. The two layers kind of form a state of equilibrium until sunlight is later applied. Now, electrons are the negatively charged, super small subatomic particles that are represented by those blue dots, and is basically where electricity gets its name. So when sunlight is applied, it agitates the electrons of the negative side of the cell and heads for the quote holes on the positive side, creating a flow of electrons to the metal contacts all over the cell. This type of electricity is direct current because it flows in one direction, starting with the sun and ending onwards. This flow is collected by larger wires and then whisked away through the junction box that you see back over on the left and onward. Now, later we'll talk about how we convert that DC electricity to the AC electricity you're accustomed to pulling out of your wall sockets in your home. How are we doing so far, Casey? Any questions?
You're doing great. Let's keep going.
All right. All right. Now, how do we measure this stuff? Well, a good way to talk about it is power and energy, two different terms. Electric power is defined as the rate at which electrical energy is consumed. And the term for power and electricity is usually a watt. Now, you've seen wattages on light bulbs, appliances in your home, and there are wattages on solar modules. So to calculate watts, you multiply volts times amps. Now, these are new terms potentially to you. They were to me too. And to make sense of this, one of the closest metaphors for electrical power is thinking of water running through a hose. Okay? Volts are a measure of pressure or force pushing that water through the hose. Amps are the volume of water droplets in that hose. So to kind of extend the metaphor, the more droplets of water in a hose, the more amps are moving through an electrical wire, like this sheet copper wire here, and the electrons moving through it. And the more you turn on that spigot, the higher voltage you have running through that wire, the more pressure. So basically, you measure the number of droplets of water times the pressure pushing them through, and that's how you'd measure power, or watts, and that's that formula here. This is an instantaneous measure of power in the moment. So you can measure a solar module that way too. When a solar module is built in a factory, they put it in a chamber down, like you can see here in the lower right. They actually flash it with super bright light simulating the sun, and they measure that wattage, that instantaneous power. That wattage gets put on a sticker on the back of the solar module and is sometimes called its nameplate rating or power. So to kind of complete the thought, you might have, let's say, a 30 module solar system where each module was 400 watts. And you multiply those two together, 30 times 400, and you then have a 12 kilowatt system. and that's a measure of a solar system's power. Now, that's an important distinction from energy. So energy is power delivered over time. That's the power we just talked about, delivered over a length of time. On your utility bill or that of your parents, you won't see kilowatts anywhere. You'll see kilowatt hours. So what is that? 1 kilowatt hour of energy can come from a whole bunch of different things, but in the case in the middle of the screen here, it can come from running one 100-watt light bulb for 10 hours, okay? So that's power times time equals that energy consumption. Similarly, you could run 100 or 10 100-watt light bulbs for just 1 hour to get 1 kilowatt hour. So it's power times time to understand what energy you're actually consuming as you run appliances or you run a household. So a solar system will produce a different amount of energy depending on where it lives. In average conditions in Western Washington State, for example, 1 kilowatt of solar power, that's power, will produce around 1.1, a factor of 1.1, or around 1,100 kilowatt hours in a year. So a 10 kilowatt system, which is about our customers' average last year in 2019 installed, will produce around 11,100 kilowatt hours per year. So to bring that into sense or in line with what you know about homes, the average Northwest home, Washington, Oregon, consumes around 12,000 kilowatt hours per year. As you see in my writings down below, Western Oregon tends to produce a tiny bit more. So the same system installed in Western Washington installed in Western Oregon produces a bit more. And so we're often covering with that 10 kilowatts of solar quite a bit of any one homeowner's energy consumption requirements. All right, Casey, this is where we put everyone on the spot. I don't know how many people you got out there. I don't know how many people you got listening carefully, but this is a great opportunity for a pop quiz.
Okay, we've just launched the pop quiz. Kilowatt hours are a measure of, and then there's 4 options to answer.
I'm hoping everyone's seeing that poll. I don't see it, but I'm a presenter, so I probably don't. That's okay.
Yep, I think you're good. We've got a little over half of our attendees have responded so far. I think we'll get to 100% in the next few seconds. And I think we're there. So I will close the poll and let's see what the results are. Michael, can you see these results? 71% of people are saying electrical energy, 24% are saying electrical power.
All right, I can't see it, but thanks for listing those out. The correct answer is that kilowatt hours are a measure of electrical energy. Remember that kilowatts are a measure of power, and kilowatt hours, or power delivered over time, is a measure of electrical energy. Great job, most of you. Well done.
And we're back to your slides now, Michael, so feel free to keep going.
Oh, no, we got one more question. We got one more question there. Should have one more poll.
There we are. Sorry about that. Charles Fritz first suggested that, quote, we may see the photoelectric plate competing with coal-fired fossil fuel plants in, and then an option of 4 years, 1839, 1958, 1883, or 2006. Got about 75% of our participants voting. And I think we'll close it here because the majority of people are giving us the same answer, which sounds about right. So it looks like 86% of the answers came in for the year 1883. How did they do, Michael?
Excellent work, everyone. Yeah, the very forward-thinking Mr. Fritz called his shot in 1883 for solar to start taking market share from fossil fuels. Very interesting. Cool. Thanks, Casey. All right, we can move along. Good job, everyone. Glad you're on your toes. All right, so now back to Jennifer for a minute. I don't know if she knew this when she went solar, but fast forward to 2006, all right, when it really started to dawn on folks in earnest in the United States as to what was possible with solar. Besides the fact that the sun already is powering all life on Earth, scientists from the US Department of Energy and the Sandia National Laboratory calculated that in just 1.5 hours, enough sunlight falls on the Earth to run electrical energy consumption worldwide. They measure that off of 2001's electrical consumption from all of the countries of the world. In an hour and a half, enough sunlight will meet all of the world's needs. So let's fast forward on to today to learn how a typical solar system like Jennifer had built, might take advantage of this. So what you see here is the anatomy of a very typical residential solar system, and frankly, it very much it's very similar in a commercial implementation as well. But let's start up here. We obviously have the sun shining on a solar array mounted to the roof. As we stated before, that's creating DC electricity, and it's running in a wire typically through a conduit, metal conduit, down to what we call an inverter. This is a box that hangs on the wall, sometimes inside, sometimes outside, and is working hard to convert that energy from DC to AC usable electricity. And sometimes that inverter hangs on a wall centrally. Sometimes we decide to put little mini inverters, or micro inverters as they call them, behind each solar module on the roof. Either way, it's helping to deliver AC electricity to this panel. Now, what's this panel? Well, that panel you see is typically that kind of dusty circuit breaker box you have in the basement that Grandpa told you not to touch. That it's probably a good idea too, because all of the power that is in your home, runs through that central panel. So we have to be careful. But solar is literally in the daytime bathing that electrical panel in electrons. And then that panel is sending those electrons out through the various wires and circuits in your home and powering the appliances and the iPhones and the things you might be using on a sunny day like it is today. You're literally using electrons from the sun, and my wife takes incredible pleasure from this notion that on a sunny day she gets to use those electrons directly. Now, a very key note that when we have power outages, by national law, the National Electric Code says that we must shut off the solar at the inverter level and the roof level to prevent any accidents from happening. So even when the sun is out and still shining on those modules, we have to shut it down in the event that this grid over here gets shut down. The reason is that solar array doesn't know any better. It's just going to continue to generate electrons and try to send them through. But we have the potential to shock someone who might be working on the lines as they're down to restore grid power. So that's an important notion, that solar alone isn't a backup for when the grid is down. However, in a minute, we will start talking about batteries and what they can do to alleviate those issues. Now, in a sunny summer day, we often will be producing more energy than we can consume in that moment, especially when we're all at work and we're all at school and the sun is out and most things are shut off. So what happens is that excess electricity runs out through this bidirectional meter. It's a utility meter that your utility installs that goes in both directions. And you can literally sell power back to the utility or back to the grid. We have lovely, 12, 14-hour summer days, so that often happens. Now, what happens in the wintertime? In the wintertime, it's cloudy, solar still produces, but not that well. We might need to, again, buy power from that utility to supplement our solar power. And so this bidirectional arrangement that we have here is called net metering. And it's state law in Washington and state law in most parts of Oregon. This allows us to ensure that we get credit on our utility bill for all that extra stuff we get to send back to the utility, and then buy it back for free as we bank up those credits and use them in the wintertime. That's the process of net metering. Also, this person over here has a cell phone in his or her hand, and it is the monitoring system. You can monitor your solar system often in real time to see how much power and how much energy is being delivered. And you can also, basically it becomes the bragging app for your friends and family when they come over to see your system or you want to share it with them online. Also, we'll talk about batteries. So batteries have really come on strong in the last few years as they become more and more affordable. You may
Hey,
have
Michael,
heard.
can I interrupt you with
Go
a few
ahead.
questions before we move to batteries?
Yeah, that'd be great.
If you'll go back a slide, just to clarify, you said there was 1.5 hours of sunlight would power the whole world. For how long?
I think the study references the instantaneous power need. So if let's say we stopped all the business and activity in the world for a moment, we waited and we collected 1.5 hours of sunlight, that would have collected enough power to run all the electrical systems, I believe, for that day. I could be wrong, that might be even longer, but it's at least for that entire day. That's a great question, thank you, and I'll follow up with some research.
Cool. And then I have a couple other quick questions on your systems slide that's next, which the first is about the losses from the inverter.
Excellent question. There are losses converting electricity from DC to AC power. Typically, the best of breed out there that we see are Solar Edge, which is a hybrid inverter system. We won't get too technical. And then we have Enphase, which is the microinverter option that I mentioned that gets installed behind each solar module. Those systems are 97 and 98% efficient in converting electricity and moving along that panel. So there are some losses, but it is pretty minimal. Great question.
Great. And then we have one more question about recycling, but I think it might make more sense to get to that a little bit later.
Sounds good. All right, well, just, yeah, a quick mention about batteries, and if people have some more questions, I have another slide we can talk about later. But effectively, when we install batteries, it allows that excess energy to keep those batteries charged. And in the event of a storm or a grid outage, this becomes shut off. The grid we no longer have access to grid power, and we begin to draw energy from these batteries. People immediately love to ask, well, how long are those batteries going to last? Well, it definitely depends on how many batteries you have, how big those batteries are, what your consumption is. Normally, a lot of times when we're all in grid outages, and I can remember this when I was a kid, we ran around with candles and played games. If you have that kind of mentality where you're going to keep your energy consumption low and keep playing those board games by candlelight, those batteries could last you a good long time. And because when the sun does pop out between the clouds, the sun can help replenish those batteries. It could help perpetuate the usage of those batteries for quite some time. So I think I'll leave it there. If there are more questions about batteries, definitely fire them over to Casey and we'll get them answered. I have a couple other things I can get at. That sound good, Casey?
Yes, and we had a adventurous participant who went and Googled the question about the 1.5 hours of energy from the sun, and that's enough to provide power for the entire planet for a whole year. Thanks for looking that up.
Wow, thank you very much. And I hope that is a young person who can type really fast, because clearly they did. Thank you for that. So not just a day, but a whole year. So the tremendous potential of the sun keeps on giving. Thank you for that. All right, let's move along and keep those questions coming. I'm going to talk a little bit about what makes a good solar site. Not all sites are built equal. We have lots of people who are delighted to go solar, but some of them frankly just can't because there's a couple things moving against them to do it. So number one, above all, The less shade, the better. One of the only real enemies of solar is shade. We do need plenty of direct sunlight to fall on those solar modules to make them work. They still work in low light, and they still work in shade, just not as efficiently. And so this homeowner is really kind of going for it. Hopefully this is in the sunlight more often than I'm seeing it. But this person here, and when these solar modules are shaded, is not going to produce quite as much energy as they could if it was in the sun. That's one. Secondly, where do we want to orient these modules against an azimuth? An azimuth is a compass direction. Where is it best to install these modules? Our first and primary location would be south. We can face them south, that is best. Second, west. Third, east. West and east still work fine. Just in the east, we still have a little bit of atmospheric stuff. We got more tendency in the northwest to have some clouds and rain in the morning with that burning off later, making west slightly better. And then south will tend to catch a lot more of the day's sunshine. We also think about tilt. What is an optimal tilt? Well, it's a big range. It's kind of a Goldilocks scenario. The just right area is between a 12 and 35 degree tilt. If it's too shallow of a tilt, we tend not to catch a lot of the times when the sun is lower in the sky and not quite as efficiently. If it's too steep, like we see down here, look in the lower right, it becomes just more expensive to install. It's actually technically better in the Northwest to have a very steep, kind of almost up to 45 degree array, but the costs of building a house to have that are also often expensive if you're building a new house. And additionally, it takes solar installers longer to install that system, thereby just more labor goes into doing it. And look at these two folks here. They're roped in safely, but they are very slowly moving around that roof just because of that pitch. And just imagine, solar installers install year round. Imagine if that was a metal roof and it was wet in the rain. It becomes very slippery and we have to take our time getting that done. Some other things that make great solar sites and the things we think about are the age of the roof or the remaining life in that roof. We want to make sure that when we put on a solar system that we're not going to have to take it off. That thing's going to last 30 or 40 years. And the last thing we want to do is have to put on that solar system and then have you pay someone to take it off and then put it back on while you have a re-roof. So we're not roofers, but as you can see in the upper right-hand corner, us, you, and perhaps a licensed roofer should take a look at the condition of your roof and really make sure that it has at least 10 years of remaining usable life. When you put a solar system on a roof, especially asphalt composition shingle as pictured in the upper right, it will protect the roof for a much longer time. It will shield that roof from some of the rain, obviously not all of it, and a lot of the UV rays coming from the sun, and will slow down its degradation. So that's why we want at least 10 years so you get the full value of that system. And then also, what are some of the good roofing materials that we'd like to see on roofs and like to install on? So the kind of no-goes for us, number one, cedar shake. You see those wooden shake shingles that are on roofs sometimes in the Northwest. Unfortunately, due to National Fire Code, we're not able to install solar systems on those. And then it's really expensive and sometimes undoable to install on certain tile types like Spanish tiles. They're not meant to be walked on. They will break. It is tough. If we were in California or Arizona or other hot places where they have a lot of other roofs, we'd have different mechanisms. We just don't have a lot of that up here. Metal tiles also crush under weight, so we want to be careful to stay away from them as well. But great roofing materials, like you see in the lower left, are the typical asphalt composition shingle you see on many, many homes. Those are very easy to install and inexpensive. You also have metal seam or corrugated metal roofs. You can see in the lower right-hand corner, can't quite make out those seams. That's a metal roof. Those are fantastic. We also like membrane and TPO roofs and torch down roofs. Those tend to be flat roofs that are either white or black. A little more expensive to make sure they're watertight. We definitely can install on them as well. All right. And then the third of three of kind of what makes a great solar site for us is if it's a roof that we can fit all the solar we want on one segment or one plane, that is often a little less costly to do. You can see this design in the upper right-hand corner. They didn't really design their house with solar in mind, so we kind of had to work around a whole bunch of different chopped up areas of the roof to get enough coverage on, and that kind of drives up the cost a little bit. We also want minimal obstructions, right? You can see in the lower left, I stitched together a photo here that shows skylights and various types of ventilation or pipes. And if we can get those in the home building process routed to, say, the north side of a roof, that would be fantastic. It would just give us better open area to install solar panels on. And then, we also have ground mounts. Ground mounts are very interesting options for when you can't install solar on a roof. The pros and cons are, the cons are definitely more expensive. We have to trench electricity in deep conduits and wire from the electrical meter typically attached to the house or your barn or garage out to where that system rests. We also have to build that underlying metal structure to make sure it's going to be there for 30 years, that it can stand up to the wind. However, the pros are that you get to orient and tilt that solar system exactly where you want to optimize the output. So there's kind of some gives and takes there. And then finally, I'll just say about the Pacific Northwest, it's an awesome place to install solar. Like I said, we have those big, long summer days. We have great net metering laws to build up those banks of credits in the winter for winter use. And also, hot temperatures are actually an enemy of good electrical flow. The electrons will slow down in electrical wires if it's hot. Since we have such good, moderate temperatures in the Northwest, there are actually a few days in June and July, we actually produce more solar on the same solar system that would have been installed in, say, Phoenix, Arizona, than they would have down there in the desert. That's obviously not true for the whole year. They get more sun year round. That's actually true for a couple of days. All right, I'm gonna stop talking for a second, make sure everyone was paying attention. We do have another pop quiz here. I'm gonna turn it over to Casey. There should be 2 questions.
Yeah, we're going to launch those in a second. And hey, Michael, just continuing off your last point about the temperate Northwest climate, we just had a question from Jerry, who's had solar on their home for 5 years and hasn't had to clean it once. Is that normal, or how often should people be cleaning solar panels?
Hey, that's a great question, and we get that question a lot. We're fortunate to have one thing in the Northwest when it comes to solar, and that's liquid sunshine. So a lot of times we can get some buildup throughout the drier days, dust, pollen, that kind of thing. But eventually those do get washed off by the rain almost all the time. You can clean your solar panels. We have a great video on how to do it on our YouTube site. We recommend using a soft brush, no harsh chemicals, no propelled water. But frankly, at the end of the day, if you never cleaned your solar panels, you'd probably only lose upwards of 1% of the efficiency of that solar array. It just doesn't come up that much in the Northwest as it does, say, in desert or dry climates, where low tilt solar modules might accumulate quite a bit of dust and require routine cleaning. So don't worry about it by and large.
Great. And Michael, a follow-up to that. Is it okay that it rains all the time? How do the solar panels hold up under the rain? This is a question from Julia.
Great question, Julia. They do hold up great under the rain. Each of our solar module manufacturers, put these solar modules through extensive battle testing in laboratory environments where they subject them to cycle after cycle of intense heat, because it gets, even here in the Northwest, pretty darn hot on the roof, and then cold and wet environments. Those modules are they're encapsulated to make sure to hold out the water. And I can't even think of a single time in our history that we've had water intrusion in a solar module, so you're good there.
Awesome. Well, as you just started getting to, Michael, I'm going to launch our next poll, another pop quiz question about the azimuth of a solar array. The question is the best azimuth or the compass direction to angle a solar array in the Pacific Northwest is. You've got the 4 coordinates north, south, east, and west as options. Please go ahead and cast your vote. Awesome. With the majority of people having logged their answers, I'm going to go ahead and close the poll. And sure enough, looks like everyone's getting this right. 93% of the respondents have said south as the best azimuth. Michael, do you want to confirm that's the right answer?
Great job. Yep, east and west are good too. South being best. Wonderful. Well done.
And then our final poll question here is about net metering. Net metering is selling solar power back to the grid, buying power from the grid, removing your home from the grid with solar, or to sell power to the grid and buy it back when you need it. Fantastic work again. And with nearly 100% of the people participating in the poll, I'm going to go ahead and close this and show our answers. 98% of our respondents are correctly guessing that the net metering is both selling power back to the grid and buying it when you need it. Nice work, everyone. Michael, I'll hand it back to you in just a second. I'm just going to comment that we're getting lots of really good questions about batteries. It's a really exciting technology, and I'm just going to send in the chat right now a link to a webinar that we have coming up next Thursday focused just on the topic of power outages and batteries and how those work with solar. So you can follow the link in the chat box to register for that next Thursday, April 23rd, a whole webinar dedicated just to that topic. But if we have some time in a bit, we'll try to answer the most popular or the most recurring battery questions that people are asking. All right, Michael, back to you.
Yeah, thanks for the reminder of that webinar next week. That'll be hosted by TJ Merrill, who's a battery expert who knows every single in and out. I could do some justice to those questions today, but he'll also do some deep dives where you need it. Well, great. Let's move on a little bit and figure out what do these things cost? Let's see what our friend, Jennifer in West Seattle likely paid. All right, so let's take a look at this chart. So on the left, we have cost per watt, which is a common measure of how much power a system is bringing you per every dollar you spend. Now look over here on the left. In 2011, an average residential solar system in the Northwest costed around $6.75 per watt fully installed. I know you don't know this from Adam, but that's pretty high. And so as a result, you can see that average system sizes back then were pretty small at around 5.5 kilowatts. That's this yellow bar here that's showing what the average power or kilowatts of a average residential system was here on this chart. So 5.5 back in 2011. But thanks to advances in technology, a strong global supply chain, and the improvement of our installation techniques, you'll notice that prices began to fall dramatically from 2011 onward, and system sizes increased until around 2018, when something changed. That year, the executive branch of our current federal government enacted a tariff, which is effectively a tax on all imported goods from overseas, and they were assessed directly to solar panels, 30% tariff applied to solar cells and finished solar modules. And then just a couple of months later in March, tariffs were also applied more generally to steel and aluminum, which a number of solar systems elements rely, like the racking and the railing, some of the module components themselves, etc. So since then, we've seen costs actually rise for the first time in our industry's history in 2018, 2019, and 2020. So Jennifer likely paid somewhere around the low $3 a watt, which is a fantastic improvement in 2019 from where it was in 2011. We're hoping that as the tariffs are set to taper off over the coming years. Prices will stabilize and perhaps return to a downward trend as we get more support for solar power. And as we discussed before, as you're thinking of your own home and what it costs, it's like a fingerprint. Every home is absolutely different. Even two houses that are identically built sitting side by side are different because solar's home price is dependent on factors like the roof type, the tilt, the number of arrays you're choosing to put on your home, the size of your electrical bill because of your consumption habits, the location of that home in the state, the materials you decide to select, and more. But I did just kind of want to provide a general overview of what solar costs look like. And I'll pause for questions in just a second, but I wanted to also explain some of the other great benefits of solar as well. We've seen studies both from the Department of Energy, but also now from Zillow, saying that the value of your home will increase when you install solar. People more and more and more are becoming comfortable with solar. They're seeking out homes with solar because they know that means lower utility bills for them. And Zillow said, as a nationwide average, now that there's over 2.3 million installs of solar in the United States, and there's enough comparables that on average, homes that have solar versus those that don't sell for about 4.1% more. So that's something you can take advantage of if you had to sell your home down the line. Also, the federal tax credit is still alive and well. It is 26% of your system costs and is paid back to you through your taxes that you file that year. There are some requirements for that, but they're fairly mild. And that tax credit is due or good through 2020. And then in 2021, it falls 4% down to 22% and then disappears entirely down to 0% at the end of 2021. So keep an eye on that clock. And then, of course, after that, federal tax credit is applied, the rest of your investment is paid off through those utility savings that you get to enjoy month after month for years to come. More and more people are adding battery solutions. I know you have a lot of questions about that. One of the key questions is it eligible for the federal tax credit? It is. The IRS did make a ruling a couple of years ago that said if you pair it with solar and you primarily power it with solar power, it too gets the 26% federal tax credit when installed this year. I'll also say a lot of our customers are just interested in independent power production. They don't want anyone to tell them how to produce their power, or how much it should cost, or where it comes from. They want to be able to depend on it from the sun, and they want to make sure that the costs don't continue to go up and up and up forever. They want to prevent against that. Of course, we're all in this for carbon reduction too. This is an incredible way to reduce our carbon footprint in our homes, in our electrical consumption. And as more people plug in their cars to these systems, that comes along with it as well. We are super blessed in the Northwest, and I'm serious, and I talk to installers all over the country who don't have this option. There are a number of local credit unions in the Northwest that provide low interest financing just for solar, and they have terrific customer service and all that. It's wonderful. And I'll tell you, and I'll just cut to a picture of my own system, it just feels amazing when you and your kids or you and your parents walk in to your home or come home from work or school and we're all back again and you first see that system on your home producing clean electrical power. It feels like nothing I could describe. I had tears in my eyes and I was jumping up and down. I was looking for high fives. No one happened to be home at the time, so it was me and the dog, but it was an amazing feeling. So anyway, I just want to pause right there and maybe take some questions if there are any.
So many good questions, Michael, coming in. One that's caught my eye is a question about solar in Wenatchee, Washington, which definitely has hotter summer days than some other parts of Washington. Is that too hot in the summer for solar? Michael, we might have lost you on mute. Are you there?
Yeah, great question. Sorry, I was on mute there. Fantastic question. Yes, and I know it does get hot in Wenatchee in the Chelan area. We do have some installations out there. No, it does not get too hot. Solar systems are installed all over the world in intense battle-hardened desert environments. They get intensely hot. Solar production does slow down a bit because of those electrons getting stymied, or more resistance is created in those wires from heat. It still works perfectly well.
And I have another weather-related question for you about wind. Really windy areas where it's typical to have gusts 40 or 50 miles an hour. What does that look like for having solar panels on your roof?
Very important question. We must install solar with incredible care and with an eye towards the extreme environments that our state can set up for us. And one of them is wind. Default solar implementations are set up to withstand gale winds of up to 130 miles per hour. We are using equipment, racking and railing equipment that's mounted to roofs that have that minimum standard in place. Unfortunately, if the winds are greater than 130 miles an hour, we obviously have bigger things to worry about than solar systems. But it's an excellent question and something we pay very close attention to. Thanks for the question.
Well, I think we only have time for one more question. A bunch of things still coming in about batteries, which I don't think we're going to get a chance to answer today. I'm going to put in the chat box in a second a link to a page on our website that has the whole series of Lunch and Learn webinars we've been hosting. And at any time, feel free to email us, and we'd be happy to send you out recordings to some of the webinars that have already happened that you may have already missed. But the final question for you, Michael, if you're up for it, is what do you think is the coolest invention coming out related to solar in the next few years?
Wow, great question. I'm excited for this particular question because it's coming. It's going to be another 3 or 4 years till it's in production and in people's homes. But I'm excited about what they call V2G, or vehicle to grid. You know, the adoption of electric vehicles is going up, up, up. I'm sure many of these people, you people on the line, have electric cars and maybe even plug in to your home today. Well, imagine being able to plug your car into your home and have it be the backup source for your home when the power goes down. Right now, manufacturers of electric vehicles are excited about this, but cautious because they don't want people to void their warranties on their cars. But in the coming years, that huge battery on 4 wheels, provided it's in and around your neighborhood and parked it at home, might become a great way to back up your solar system when the grid goes down. So that's something I'm excited about. There's a couple other things, but I think that's the one I'm most excited for since I'm an EV car owner as well.
Great. Anything else you want to try to cover, Michael, before we close?
Yeah, maybe one more thing, and I think this is interesting maybe for some of the young people on the line who are considering a career in solar. There is way more people in solar than you would imagine. It is the fastest growing segment of energy production in the country and most countries in the world. As you can see here, in 2019, we had almost 250,000 people, including the United States and Puerto Rico, working in the solar trades. That number will go up and up and up as we continue to support solar. The breakout of where they're working is here: residential, utility scale, and non-residential. The jobs by sector, depending on what's interesting to you, operations and maintenance is around 12,000 people. I don't know what they comprise as other, but then 30,000 people are involved in selling the components to the installers and making sure we have what we need to install. There is manufacturing of solar components in the United States, both before and after tariffs were applied. There are about 35,000. And then the mother load of people working in solar are actually, like A&R Solar, are installers, and that's 162,000 people and growing in the US. And why that's important is that these are pretty darn good paying jobs, and you cannot export these jobs. People need to be there on roofs installing solar with great expertise and great know-how and get paid well to do it. So it's a wonderful transition from other industries to get into, and we will definitely need people. In Washington and Oregon, we have around 3,700 people as of 2019. And as you can see in the handout section of the webinar, there's something called A&R jobs or jobs in solar. And it's kind of this mind map you can see here that will kind of take you through this process. Well, how do I feel about heights? All right, well, no thanks. And maybe there's some jobs that you might want to pursue in solar when you're ready in that vein. Or, yeah, I like heights and this is fun. This is where the views are. You might take a different path. So definitely download that and consider your future in solar as well. Any other questions I can tackle, Casey? Maybe any quick ones before we wrap it up? Otherwise, I can close it up.
You know, I think we're out of time, and I have a few people sending in some questions that we are going to follow up with over email. So if you didn't get your question answered, feel free to still shoot that in even as we're closing down the webinar, and we'll be happy to send you an email and address your specific question, especially if you have questions about solar in a very specific place of the Pacific Northwest that you live in. And with that, I think that comes to the end of our webinar. A reminder that this was recorded. You'll have an email coming to you automatically in the next day or so that will send you a link to this webinar so that you can watch it again or reference a certain part that you need to listen to. And if any other questions come up, feel free to shoot us an email, info@a-rsolar.com, or you can find us online. There's a lot of other great resources available to learn about solar, battery storage, or jobs or policy efforts that we're working on in the overall renewable energy space. Thank you again for everyone who attended. It's really lovely to have your support and your interest during this unique time in our history where we're all trying to think about what's next. If solar's next for you, please shoot us a line, or if you have any other questions, don't hesitate to reach out. Michael, thank you again for being part of this and for your compelling presentation. You covered a lot of really great territory in just an hour. We look forward to seeing everybody else at another upcoming webinar. And if you have any other suggestions for topics that you'd like to see webinars on, please reach out about that as well. Thanks again, everyone. Hope you're enjoying a really sunny, beautiful Pacific Northwest day.